Hey guys, welcome to the green room.
Hi, Jenna.
Hi. This is so cute, by the way. I love this table, this whole setup. I feel like we're Sunday brunching.
All for you.
Oh,
need mimosas.
I feel so important. Okay, so normally we just I just love to just kind of talk and kind of just air out what we're feeling, and it's nice because I feel like we'll get a good idea of, how everybody kind of looks at the industry, and especially when it comes to anxiety and what we were saying before. So it's really just open today. We can just put our hearts on the table. Angie, why don't you give Ryan and Shirley a little intro for everyone?
Welcome to the green room.
Thanks.
I'm so excited
Love
you guys
your
are
green.
here. Yes. Thanks for wearing some green, and we have some green in the background. Our special guest today, Ryan Dusick. He is a founding member, drummer of Maroon 5, and he is now a associate marriage and family therapist, a mental health advocate, and author of a book that's out now called Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all, and finding recovery, which I've read and is amazing. And I feel like everybody in the industry should read it because it's really, you offer a lot of wisdom there.
And it's crazy because she read the book, and she I don't know if you guys knew that they were friends.
She read a guest column.
Yeah, that's
that
how
Ryan had written, but we should probably do my introduction.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll explain it.
And
Yes.
Shirley Halperin, our friend, is an executive editor at Variety. She is she oversees all of music for both Variety and Variety.com.
So sick.
I'm Angie Pagano. I'm a music manager, not the important one here. And Jenna Andrews is the founder of The Green Room, and she is a multi-hyphenate, platinum singer, songwriter, executive producer, A&R,
God.
publisher. The list goes on and on. So,
thanks, Angie.
yeah, thank you all for coming.
Never gets less embarrassing. Every time you hear about yourself, I'm like, and I have this crazy eyelash that's in my eye. I'm like, God.
Wait, so the genesis of this whole talk
Yes.
is because, Ryan and I, just so you know, we go way back because I've been writing about music forever and was interviewing Maroon 5 in their early years, their Songs About Jane years, and a long time after that too. So when Ryan came out with this book, which was about his leaving the band and finding himself and his purpose, and obviously dealing with some really challenging issues, it came out right around the time when a lot of artists were canceling tours because of mental health issues. Shawn Mendes, Justin Bieber, Arlo Parks was another one. So beyond the COVID issues, how hard it is to make money on the road, there's also this other thing, which is the anxiety that it produces. So I asked Ryan if he would write a guest column for us addressing that issue, and he did, and he killed the assignment. Clearly, you were a good student. And Angie, you saw that article.
Yeah, when Jenna and I started talking last year about working together on the Green Room, I just, over break started Googling all mental health music, and I came across the article on Variety and sent it to her, and I was like, we have to have him on. It makes so much sense.
That's amazing.
And then
I love
because
that.
of the link with Variety, I was like, our friend Shirley needs to be on here too.
Well, no, and we've been talking about this for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, because I know that this is a bestie. I love her.
Yes.
One of many.
Oh, no, why do you always say
It's
that?
It's
It's our thing. And I appreciate that. And I know that we talked briefly. We're only getting to me now, which is kind of nice in some ways when you're having these things, because I think it's good to get to know people this way. But for me, and what we left off kind of saying is that I went through an artist period that I felt like it just, the anxiety of it and performance and stuff was so heavy in terms of the preparation of not necessarily performing, but it's all the stuff around it and the politics and all those things that were just crushing, and I think that when I left Island Def Jam, it was I wanted to be able to make music and also feel joy from it, and I felt like I lost that joy in the anxiety of it. And that's what I thought was very interesting about your story, and obviously what you were writing about, because I can completely relate to that, and I think a lot of people can. It's just hard to admit. you know?
It's crazy to think that the thing that you dreamed about doing your whole life, the fantasies you had about the life that you would live, you know, playing music for a living, could all of a sudden be something that's really breaking you down and, you know, becomes a toxic lifestyle when you're just, you know, stretched beyond your means to cope.
100%. I mean, can you tell me a bit of your experience, like in terms of obviously your journey and just how you got to the point that you got to in terms of anxiety and just your view on it?
Yeah, well, I was somebody who put a lot of pressure on myself to begin with.
Right.
So going out on the road, like every single show was like, it's going to be the greatest show ever. I'm going to be... And so it was like the intersection of that internal pressure with the external pressure of everything you're describing. Not just the shows every night, but the meet and greets and the, you know, the photo shoots and all the stuff that goes into it that, you know, a lot of people don't see.
Right.
That your days are filled with. And for us, it was 2002, 2003, we played over 500 shows in 2 years. And we did all that stuff on top of it, you know, the in-store appearances and the radio appearances, all that stuff. And so there was no downtime whatsoever. And I'm kind of an introvert, you know, I need my downtime.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of built up over time. It wasn't something that happened in one day or in one tour. So all of a sudden I'm realizing like there's no end in sight. And every day is just another day of more adrenaline and more stress, and I'm exhausted. And then we're going overseas, and there's jet lag. And so it was, by 2004, when the band really blew up, that was like 2 years deep into the album, I was like at the end of my rope. I was like, I can't do this anymore. My body was breaking down. I was having shoulder pain and nerve problems, coordination problems. And it was really now I see it as my body telling me, like, you can't keep going this way.
Right.
You know, it was like my mind wanted to keep going. It was like, I'm going to push through this.
Exactly.
I'm tough. I can handle it. But my body was just like, no, you're done.
Exactly. And it's so interesting. Like, that's exactly what I felt. Like, for me, and just being completely transparent, because that's what this is for, obviously. But like, there was one show that I played that I drank so much that I literally fell off the stool, and it was like that was the moment where I was like, yeah, like I have a problem. Like, this is bad. And it's not like, I always looked at alcohol for me as like such a crutch. It was the only thing, because I've never been like into drugs, thankfully, you know. And it was something that was just I couldn't deal with anxiety. It was just way too much. And so when that happened, I quit drinking after that happened. And interestingly enough, like I still lived in Canada, and I got like a big like TV opportunity. But it's funny how the universe sort of like speaks to you in that sense. They're like, okay, this was not good for you. You know, obviously it was a sign that was getting too much. But yeah, I mean, it's really not the dream aspect, like you said. It's not the music. It's not what we sign up for as a 6-year-old kid. You know, it's like all the pressures of what people expect of you. Mm-hmm. You know, because you already think, like, even like friendships or like dinner parties, for example, right? Like, just even if we weren't in music, if you show up to a dinner party and it's kind of like nerve-wracking to like meet other people that you don't know, and you're like, are they gonna like me? Am I weird? It's
the social pressures.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, it's on steroids for what we do. And so it's like the whole time. And for me, from like a woman's perspective, it's like, you know, all the things where you'll see, you know, the head of your label, and they're like, you look great. And then you'll get a call the next day like, yeah, I think you've been eating too much pizza in the studio, or like, I think you gained some pounds, like such and such thought you looked terrible last night. And you're like, well, they told me I looked great. Like, and you're like, no, they thought you looked awful. And you're just like, what? Like, it starts to just completely screw with you. And that's, to me, where I was just like, and I already came from a place growing up that I was like predisposed to feel anxiety. So I think this was just like a heightened fear. And I think it's a constant coping thing. I mean, you see it. I mean, how do you feel from the side that you're on?
I definitely see the pressure, especially on women. And the less they wear on stage, the more I sometimes think they were pressured into this, because why would anyone want to like strut around on stage in their underwear? I mean, some people do, but you know, I just,
different career.
Yeah, my inclination is always like, oh, someone made this person do this or suggested this person do this. And, you know, I do think that it's crazy pressure, especially as a teenager. And then from where we sit, it's kind of funny because we all pursued our teenage dreams as careers. And it is kind of like a weird thing, because like, who else does that? You know, when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be a baseball player. You don't actually, you know, try to get into the minor leagues,
it's
you know?
so true.
But we actually pursued our teenage dreams as careers, which kind of always makes you think about your life and where you came from and why you're here. And I think, just to your point, Jenna, when you realize how the sausage is made, the photo shoots and the, how many opinions are there for every mix down or whatever, it's not really glamorous
at all.
No.
Yeah.
And that exactly. And I think that's the thing that's very intangible in a way. Like for us, it's tangible because you live it, right? But in terms of future generations or people coming up, or often, I'm sure you guys all get it, it's like, I want to be this, like, tell me advice. And it's kind of like, God, where do you even start?
Yeah, you're like, don't.
Yeah, you're like, don't do it.
Yeah.
I could see as a parent being like, absolutely not. But like, I think that like for me, it's a catch-22, right? Because it's your passion. And I do think to some extent anxiety and adrenaline is a good thing, because I think it makes you perform on a high level.
Sure.
Right? But like you said, like the body stress.
Well, I wanted to ask Ryan.
I wanted to do that.
Because Ryan, he puts up all these videos on his Instagram of footage of Maroon 5 when they were just developing Kara's Flowers, even before it was Maroon 5. And I can see sometimes, especially in the TV tapings and stuff, that you are playing so hard. Yeah. Like, when you look at that, are you like, can you see that you're like, I mean, it is the adrenaline, but it's also just like, I'm putting everything I have into this 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, and that was the kind of drummer I was and the kind of musician, because I was not a school-trained musician. Like, I taught myself to play in my garage, and that was the fun of it. It was just beating the hell out of the drums. It was expression. It was my freedom. That's what it was, And then you take that on the road, and all of a sudden you're having to do that night after night, performing at that level. And you get one shot, sometimes on live TV. That was like my biggest fear. It was like when we did live TV, I'm going to drop my drumstick or something and blow it in front of 7 million people, right?
Yeah.
But I was just like, and I can see the progression, actually, if you watch video after video, of how much more like constrained I get. Like, I'm gripping the sticks harder and forcing it more and more. And if you look at me when I was 16, it was just like free and fun. And then in 2004-5, it's like, I was terrified, of like messing up. And that was a lot in my head, was going on, and my body feeling like it was not able to keep up with it. But it was also all of the pressure that you feel externally coming on top of that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you can tell. And I read I think it was an interview with you where you said you would be kind of like hanging with these like Berklee School of Music trained musicians, like real jazz aficionados, like who know the drums, but you learned because you were into grunge and you were listening to like Soundgarden, right?
Well, that was the whole band.
And your older brother being into music.
I mean, Adam, Jesse, Mickey, and I, the 4 guys who started Kara's Flowers in 1994, we were a grunge band in my parents' garage, right? And we were
Which
just
is amazing.
Yeah,
I love
you should see Adam Levine's hair. It is something.
But that's what it was. And so like when we got to that level, all of a sudden, a decade later, where we're playing on stages with the biggest pop artists in the world, with the biggest hits currently on the radio, the people in their bands were people that were really trained, schooled musicians. And so I think we all dealt with a little bit of imposter syndrome. It's like, we're not real musicians. We're just a garage band faking that we're real musicians. And so there's an inherent sort of not feeling like you belong there when you go into it in that way. But it was hard, because I was looking at these drummers who could do it in their sleep. And it was a lot of effort on my part. Every performance took a lot more effort. And so it was like I had this premonition, this like sense of impending doom. Like, there's only a certain amount of time I can keep up with this, and then I'm going to go down hard. And sometimes that can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you focus on the negative thing.
For sure. No, go ahead. I agree with you, though. I think that's a big part of it.
Well, we talk about the power of positive thought, right? If you believe something's going to happen, you tell yourself enough times that it's going to happen. That has a lot to do with whether or not it's actually going to work out or not, because you have to believe. But the opposite is true too, right? If you tell yourself the negative thing enough times, you start to believe it, and it starts to manifest in the way that you're living, right?
Amen. It's true. Not amen to the negative stuff, but yes.
No, it's like a constant balance.
And what's so weird, and I have to, like, I'm just, speaking from personal experience, but also factual. I mean, it's true. I think we somehow, and I don't know if it's just a human thing or a creative person thing, but like with the negative thoughts, it's almost like you crave that. Like, without them, it's almost like, where are they? You know what I'm saying? It's like you kind of like, it's a thrill in a weird way, because you think when you're too positive, you're like, wait, life can't be this good in a weird way, right? Because as an artist, the pain is a driver for a lot of good music too, which is kind of the catch-22, which you don't. So you need to find a place, which is why therapy is great, right? But I mean, to be able to place it somewhere where you're able to access it, but not have it ruin you.
And I also think, and you talked about this too, how sometimes you're running through the negative thoughts because you're trying to prepare and get ahead of like, all right, how do I deal with that negative situation when it happens? And instead of like being able to handle it when it comes, it just ends up like it's self-fulfilling, you know, instead of being like, all right, when this happens, I'm going to handle this. And it's going to be all good because I prepared myself through all these negative thoughts. But instead it just like ends up being a horrible situation.
Yeah, well, there's this sort of fallacy that goes along with anxiety for a lot of people that struggle with anxiety, that if you think about it enough, somehow it's going to prepare you and you'll be able to avoid the bad thing from happening. But the reality is, by thinking about it so much, you're dwelling on it, you're sitting in it, and it's becoming more and more a part of your being. Whereas if you're not fixated on it, if you're not ruminating about it, it's not as likely to be a part of what's going to actually occur.
And like that's why it's not like on accident that people say when it rains it pours, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like it could be anything. You're just having an awful day and then you're like, oh, then I got in like a fender bender, and then after that you like lost something, and it's just like cyclical, right? And it's the same with positive thought though, that which is really crazy. And it's like I've seen it happen, so, like you have, or like we all have, so many times. And it's but but I guess the hardest part for negative versus positive thought, in my opinion, is being able to actually feel those genuinely and authentically. Because if you wake up one morning and you're just like, I feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm not prepared, or all these type of things, but you tell yourself, let's just say, even though you feel that, you tell yourself, I'm good, but you don't actually feel it, the negative thing will actually still present itself. You need to actually believe that you're great in order for it to manifest into positivity, which is the hardest thing to do, in my opinion.
I think that's why it's practice, because if you wake up one day and try to change, the last 4 months of negative thought with one day of positive thought, you're dealing with an avalanche of something you're fighting against, right? But if it becomes habit, it's daily affirmations, it becomes part of your being, it's reminding yourself, we talk to ourselves a lot of the time in a way that we would never talk to somebody else that we cared about a lot.
Oh my God.
Facts.
The worst.
If you're talking to your best friend or your family member or your partner or whatever, you're going to be like, no, you're great. What are you talking about? You're great. You're going to kill it. You'd say that. But we don't say that to ourselves. Often we're like, oh, I'm going to blow this. Oh, that was terrible. I screwed that up. And we get used to it. And if you tell yourself something enough times, you're going to believe it eventually, right? And both are true. So it's like getting in that habit of every time you have that negative thought, replacing it with a more constructive thought. Even if you don't really feel it yet, just like, what's a thought that's actually going to like lead to something positive for me in this moment? And if you do that enough, eventually you start to believe it.
So is that, okay, so do you, in terms of practice, is that something you do every day?
Well, yes, but it's something that I did over a matter of time, because I went through a decade after I left the band of my self-esteem just being absolutely like bottomed out.
Right.
My confidence was gone because my whole identity was wrapped up in being the drummer in Maroon 5. And all of a sudden I wasn't that anymore. And so who am I? And what is my value? What is my worth? So I told myself for all that time when I was looking to alcohol to solve my problems, and just telling myself like, well, you blew it, you're a failure, you're defective, so might as well just try to feel good, is basically what I was telling myself on a daily basis. But then when I quit that and I walked into recovery for the first time, I realized that all of that was self-defeating, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't believe it yet.
Right.
But over a matter of a couple years of every day working on it, then in a matter of time, I did start to believe it. And I started to believe that if I walk into things with giving myself grace, it might be hard, you might fail, but you can overcome it, you can learn from it. Then you actually start believing that I can overcome things. I can take on a challenge and the positive thing can happen.
That's so, gratitude is a big part of it, and we've spoken about that a lot in these conversations. Like, it's just to be able, there was something that we said the other day, like, it's okay, I'm okay, it's okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, which is interesting, but when you say it out loud, you're like, yeah, there's something comforting about it.
I'm okay, it's okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so weird, because immediately, like, you're like, it gives you some type of solace, which you're like, okay, there's something to this.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what I think about a
Yeah.
lot is, and it's obviously, just a thing that happens when you're in the music industry, is that so many amazing artists have died because they've overdosed, or they had mental health issues, or they had addiction issues. And I think, I feel for the artists who are like, am I a good songwriter because, I did whatever drug that day and that's how this song came out? And if I'm sober, will I still have those talents? And the fear that you'll lose it by losing the substance has got to be like a really torturous way to be. And then on the flip side, and I'm bringing this up because you spend a lot of time in Nashville, I'm looking at country music where like half the songs are like 2 shots of whiskey and or the beer,
a lot of drinking.
Beer never let me down. Really? Beer never let you down? And it's like, it glamorizes, it glorifies this, the alcohol. And I think about all those artists who are sober, who are struggling, and like, what is this doing to them? So,
you know what's so interesting? I don't know if you saw this, but Luke Combs just put out a song.
I saw that.
Because he said all my songs are about beer and drinking and this, and I know there's somebody sitting in the audience being like, I cannot relate, I'm sober, and he put out a song for those people now, which is amazing.
He did. It's called Joe.
Yeah. And I thought
really
that's so cool. But I mean, it is crazy, and obviously you can talk to this, but like to put that on and to be, drinking every day, to feel that height of, okay, I can do this because you're in that state.
Yeah,
or
what's
even
the cause effect of that? Like, I mean, Ryan, what do you think about the whole like using it as a creative crutch, and then having that fear of like, if I don't have this, I won't be creative anymore?
Well, I think that becomes an illusion, just like everything else in addiction. It's like at a certain point that probably was true, right? The first drink you had might have made you more outgoing and less socially
That was
anxious,
going to
right?
be my point.
Right.
It might have worked,
Right.
and for a while it might have worked, and that might be true in terms of being creative. Whether it's smoking weed or drinking, you get into a zone,
Right.
and you're able to get all the thoughts out of your head that are blocking you and create something magical. The reality is you don't need that substance to do that. If it's in there, and you can access it whether you have that substance or not. But you've trained yourself now to believe that you need it. To do that. And that's true for any addict or anyone who abuses a substance. You think, I can't be my best self. I told myself this for years. I can't be my best self in a social situation if I don't have a few drinks in me.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Never mind the creative, like, yes, that, but also...
But just the, like, getting
just the
by in
daily,
life.
Well, I mean, it's not even just, like, the events or the social, like, things. It's actually sessions. Like, you think, like, there's certain sessions that are awkward. You know what I'm saying? You go in and people... And not awkward because necessarily the people are, like, not great. They can turn out to be amazing. But for this very reason is that people, as much as we talk about anxiety and we're like... When you ask somebody, they'll be open for the most part, right? Like in our industry, and maybe not so much in other industries because it's a hard thing. It's still a stigma, right? But anyway, my thing is that I think the alcohol aspect of it kind of just makes people feel a little bit looser to open up and be like, oh my God, you're going through this too? Like we can relate. Whereas if it's without that crutch, it's a little harder to feel like comfortable enough to ask somebody such a brave question, for example.
Right.
Or to open up yourself, to be like, all right, let's write a song where I'm at my most vulnerable because I have that crutch to become vulnerable.
Well, like someone like Jenna who like, I remember, I think it was Cara Diaguardi who told me this, that going into a co-writing session is like, hi, nice to meet you, take your clothes off. Like that's about it. It's like you might as well just expose everything because that is what's expected, and that is an awkward place to be, especially with someone that you don't know.
And then, but it's so weird because it's yes the creative point, but like you get there, but it's like the beginning because like everyone, especially in LA, I'm just gonna put it out there, like everyone's kind of sussing each other up, and it's kind of like. It is like, you're just like, wait, what? Like, it just feels so vulnerable in that moment.
Like you're being judged.
Right, but it's like, but that could be a head thing too, to your point of like, kind of manifesting those thoughts, because I think about that a lot, where I may think if I see you and I'm like, I may overanalyze what you actually thought in that moment.
Right.
Oh,
and even make you think it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I could look, and you could just come in super normal, hey, Jenna, how are you? And then I'm like, did she see this thing on? And then I'm like, and I'm kind of like thing, and then all of a sudden you look at it, and then it just becomes like, it's one of those things that you almost like ask for. Whereas if I just saw it for what it was, it would just be completely normal. And that's the thing about in a session, because you're kind of wondering what everyone's thinking of you, and they're wondering what you're thinking of them.
The reality is that most people are thinking about themselves.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Facts.
And that's and I think that's why and again, it's baby steps, but it's how do you like begin to break those barriers? You know what I mean? And be able to actually make these things more normalized. And I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of what people actually view anxiety today? I know it's a loaded question, whoever wants to go first, but I'm actually curious. Like,
I think we're very sensitive to it. I mean, in the press we are. You know, I remember when it became a mandate that when you write about someone who took their own life, that you put the suicide prevention information at the bottom of every article. Mm-hmm. And if you see most websites, people.com, they do that. And
we do that on here as well.
Yeah, it's a concern for mental health. You know, you don't want to trigger anyone. You want to be the trigger. And, you know, that's definitely something that's happened in the last few years. I don't recall seeing that before. I also think therapy has been maybe destigmatized a little bit because of people like Howard Stern talks about it all the time. You know, I mean, that's kind of a question for you. Like you went into therapy.
No, that was you just loaded. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, tell us about that.
Well, that was one of the main reasons why I wrote the book that I did, Harder to Breathe, because I feel like contributing to that dialogue destigmatizes therapy and people talking about their mental health. And I do notice a trend. I mean, when I go back 20 years, when I was on the road and dealing with all this myself, it was like, I really was alone. I mean, you couldn't have a conversation about this stuff and say, like, I'm struggling with my mental health.
Right.
I mean, people would have thought,
especially for
you
men,
probably
right?
didn't even know how to, like...
Sorry to interrupt, but like I was gonna say, like we talk so much about women, but as a man with anxiety, I can't even imagine how hard that is.
Yeah,
absolutely. I deal with that every day with my clients. It's like there's still that stigma about men being vulnerable. You know, you're supposed to be tough. You're not supposed to be weak. Mm-hmm. You know, and so just tough it out. And I know I internalized that a lot, even though I'm a sensitive guy by nature and I was comfortable with my feminine side. I was still like wanted to be the tough guy in some ways and live up to that sort of stereotype. But I do see a dialogue, and it's helpful for me even as a professional, because you just going on social media and seeing young people talking about this stuff and opening up and sharing their stories. Like every time you hear someone else tell their story, it's allowing a young person who's reading that or watching it to have access to something I didn't have when I was that age, you know, and it's beautiful. And so I just wanted to contribute to that.
That's exactly how I feel about this too, because I think, you know, in the short time that I've been doing these things, like it's been great, because in the beginning, we were in COVID, we were doing them live, and you'd see kids come on in the way that they would react to, you know, someone like yourselves, you know, obviously like amazing careers and done incredible things. But like hearing you say like, no, this I've gone through this and like these crazy experiences to the point where yes, you've had to get sober, or, you know, you deal with feeling like you're at zero, and like, for a lot of kids, and especially, I'm sure you guys can agree, but as me as a kid would never think my heroes would feel as bad as I felt.
Well, and I was also going to say, I bet when you started touring, you were feeling all that. You didn't even know how to say, this is what I'm feeling. Like,
yeah, you were so young.
Yeah. When you're, you know, back in 2002, like you said, when you were on tour, like, and nobody's talking about it, you probably don't know how to even say, like, what I'm dealing with is anxiety. What I'm dealing with is like this and that.
Right.
And so, you know, to be able to now come 20 years later to have these musicians be able to talk about it, I think is such an amazing growth in the industry. And thankfully, like, people like you know, are out here talking about it, like we said, you know, and just everybody that can take from this and be able to talk about it is great.
Yeah.
Well, as a kid, or for you guys, like, did you think that? Like, I'm just curious.
It's
like,
so funny because
I was curious.
No, I just had a, like, you know, like sometimes when you, like, your memory comes back and it's like, oh wow, I haven't literally not thought about this since I was 15. I remembered that my mom sent me to therapy when I was like 13 or 14. Right. And, like, I completely blocked this out. Like, I'm down with therapy. Like, I've had a therapist. I've had a therapist. I'm all good with it. But I totally forgot that I was such a bad kid that she must have felt so desperate to send me to a psychologist at that age. And I remember feeling like I couldn't be honest with the psychologist. Yeah. So it wasn't really working. If you're not honest, you can't get the help. And I didn't want to admit that I was like smoking weed or whatever. And that kept it from working. And after a few sessions, I told my mom I didn't want to go. But I was just thinking about that. And like, you know, when we were growing up, it felt like desperation if you sent your kid to a therapist. Well, now it's actually, I think, very smart because it teaches someone how to deal with other people, not get emotional. Like, I remember in my early years of magazines when I was interviewing you guys, like the pressure to work where I worked was so high that sometimes I would get super upset about like really minor things, and someone had to like tell me like you need to learn how to like pick your battles, which was just another way of saying like you're focusing on things that are like not really that important in the end game. Like all these things are like things you
all
learn.
these high pressure situations that we're all in.
Well, I think you made a great point in saying the therapy thing in terms of what it was then versus now. I mean, it's crazy because I think back then, like I remember like my teacher was like, I think, you know, she has a learning disability, which by the way, there's so many learning disabilities, right? But back then I think it was like, my parents were like, what? Like it's just so much harder to hear back then than it is now. Now there's so many different, I mean, it doesn't even matter these days. Do you know what I'm saying? There's so many ways to sort of get through it.
Or like there's there's not a prognosis, but like with,
no, right.
Like now there's actually like, okay, this person has a learning disability, so we can do A, B, C, D. Like there's a plan.
Exactly.
You know, there's resources. There's all that didn't exist.
And I think back then it's like your friends, the community would just be like, did you hear that? Such and such. Like right? Yeah. It's like it was like a thing where you're like, wait, but now it's definitely so much better. I mean, again, it's amazing to see the growth over that like the years, but I think there's still a long way to go. I mean, I had a question, I mean, as well, is that I find in the business side, what I think is crazy is that you could speak these things, right? But if you put yourself into like a conference room or a meeting and all of a sudden you have a panic attack, what are you going to say? Sorry guys, I have to leave the room. I'm having a panic attack. It's like, it's going to make you look weak. I mean, it's like, and that's the thing that I struggle with as somebody with anxiety, because it happens to me. Those kind of situations are very triggering for me. And I never know what to do in those situations. And I think, like, it's just like, okay, pray that I don't faint. Like,
what should she do, Ryan, in those situations?
Well, you know, the reality is that you do the work before so that eventually those moments don't happen anymore. Obviously, if you're in the middle of something and they're coming up, you feel a little desperate, like what am I going to do in this moment? There are tools you can learn in terms of distraction, in terms of your breathing. Mindfulness meditation is a tool that I use. And again, that's practice though. It's something that works over time.
Right.
You don't wake up one day and fight off the anxiety of your whole life with one day of mindfulness. But when you make it a habit, you know, when every day you live more mindfully and you meditate and you find that center and you realize that no matter what happens in this room, there's no tiger in here that's going to maul me, right? Like the worst is going to happen is I'm going to like freeze for a moment. I might say something wrong, or I might get a little, but like, I'm not going to die. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. Maybe I'll be a little embarrassed. Maybe I'll walk away saying, oh, I could have done better. But when you are able to be present and recognize the present moment for exactly what it is and nothing more than that, because we bring so much to the present moment that's going on internally, that's not even really reality of what's going on in the moment. That's really what anxiety is. I mean, because fear, serves a purpose, right? If there is a tiger in the room, we got to get out of there, right?
Yeah.
So it is that performance enhancer. It's that thing that makes us sharp, right? So it's tapping into, it's the relationship with the anxiety that's important. Tapping into it as a resource, as opposed to seeing it as the thing to fear unto itself. Oh my God, now I'm afraid of having a panic attack, as opposed to something that's actually a reality of this situation.
I think I read recently something that like fear is like the past when you're thinking about what's happened in the past, and anxiety is future. And like if you can stay in the present moment, like relieves you of both of those things, past and future. Right. And so it's really about like bringing yourself present.
Radical acceptance of the present moment is what mindfulness is all about. And I try to practice that. That's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning every day. I stretch and I focus on what is actually happening in this moment. I'm breathing, I'm feeling my hamstring stretch, there's a little bird chirping outside. It's like, there's nothing that scary going on, right? And if you can carry that with you through your day, when those moments come that are anxiety inducing, a little fearful, they're not as anxiety inducing. You realize what's actually happening is not as scary as what I'm bringing to it.
What does radical acceptance mean? Because I've been hearing that thrown around a lot lately.
Radical acceptance of the present moment, meaning like life on life's terms is the way we would say it in the 12-step community. Like, I have to accept the present and what is going on for what it is. I'm not the one who gets to dictate what it is. I only have control over myself, not over reality. And the more I'm able to sit in the reality of the moment, radically accepting what is, not what I want it to be or what I'm worried it will be, or really sitting in what is. And there are ways to practice that. You know, it's an idea, it's a philosophy, but there's meditation attached to the actual practice of it. And it's just it's not bringing judgment to it, right? Not being critical of it, not imposing your judgment on it, having an open mind to what the moment is bringing you, being receptive to what it is. Because I think one reaction to anxiety is to try to control every outcome. I'm guilty of that. That's my tendency.
Same.
Right? If I can plan for this, if I can plan for that.
I don't think so.
Wow.
You don't go into an interview being like, this is how I want this to go.
Yeah, but not overly like, I don't overanalyze it. I also think and you're probably like this too, John, there's so much going on.
Yeah.
I don't have time to focus on these like little things. I just get through it.
Are you you don't have to admit or not, but do you struggle with anxiety?
I have. I've definitely I think my thing right now is like sleep. I get so wound up like when I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm thinking a million things and then I can't get sleep, and then that's not good. My therapist has told me sleep is incredibly important and restorative, and you can't function on 5 hours of sleep. You will not be as good, and that's something I think about. But no, I'm pretty zen.
I know, and I feel that from you too. I mean, it's an interesting thing because as you were talking, I think one thing that I found interesting is focusing on the present is everything that so much, a lot of people will say that, and I think it's very true. But the one thing about the future is hope, and humans thrive on hope.
Sure.
And I think that there's an aspect of that, right? So whether or not you're saying, okay, I'm here right now, Shirley's sitting beside me, I have this cup of tea, yes, that's right. But also the thought of, I could maybe get this song in this or whatever is an exciting thought as well. So what do you think about that? Because there is an aspect of trying to manifest or control the future to some extent. And so, I'm curious what you thought about that.
Well, I think there's a balance to everything.
Okay.
Right? And I think that the balance in that is it's okay to have thoughts about the future. We all have to plan to a certain extent, right? You can't just disregard what might occur. But what we can focus on is what we can control in this moment. Because you can only live in this moment, right? It's what can I do in this moment that's going to make that outcome more likely? Because if you're worrying about all the things that can go wrong or all the things that are out of your control, you're fixating basically on things that aren't going to be productive for you, right? So, for me, since I've been sober, it's been almost 7 years now, and basically,
congratulations. Thank
you. The thing that has been the most helpful piece of advice is just doing the next indicated action, which means what is the thing that this moment dictates for me is the most helpful thing for me to step into and do.
I love that.
Right? Because if you do that every single day of your life.
Say that one more time.
The next indicated action, right? Because I've literally done that every day for 7 years, and it brought me back to school to get a master's degree in clinical psychology and become a therapist. It led me to writing a book about my story and getting it published, talking with nice people like you about this stuff and advocating for mental health, and all these wonderful things that have come in my life. I didn't have a plan for all of that. I had some ideas in my mind, and I had things that was like, oh, that would be nice. But I basically just did the next indicated action each day. And that led me to the things. And sometimes things I hadn't even thought would be the thing, right? It was follow that path, what feels purposeful, feels meaningful. And opportunities present themselves that I could have never imagined. And if I had been strict in my mindset in terms of it's going to be this, and that, I might have missed those things. I might have missed those better paths that presented themselves that I was able to recognize because of the radical acceptance of the present moment and just seeing, oh, there's the next indicated action. I'm going to go this way now.
I love that.
Oh my, isn't
We
that?
only have 5 minutes.
Oh,
on
okay,
this tape.
okay.
I was gonna say,
I almost wanted to I wish we had like a little notepad because sometimes we do, but
well,
it's okay.
It's okay.
I have it in my head.
Yeah, it's being recorded.
Okay.
We'll get you a transcript. I was gonna say that I have I think a more spiritual view, which is I always try to help others, and just exactly like what we're doing. You know, I just put out good vibes in the universe, and hope it will come back. And
That's
often it doesn't. There's a lot of assholes in the music business, but at this point, I'm just I shrug it off. It's not. It doesn't get me down. But you are in a different high pressure situation.
Right.
You need to produce. You're only as good as your last hit. You you need to produce, and that's a lot.
I don't know, for me, honestly, as much as the anxiety, sometimes I forget where it even comes from, if that makes sense. Because I'm not necessarily, when I go to sleep at night, I don't know that I care that much about what people think of me. Obviously I want them to think I'm a good person and all those things, but I'm not sure that that's my fear. It's more so what you said is in terms of producing output, the pressure. Yeah, the pressure of it. I don't that's why it's weird in these rooms. Well, I'm why do I have anxiety? Because I don't if I'm walking out, I not to be rude, but I'm if you didn't like me, then okay, I didn't do anything wrong, so I didn't deserve you not to. So that's really my what I think about, which is interesting that I would have fear, because I'm I don't feel that.
Well, this all feels like worries about what other people will think about.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I don't feel I have, you said that, right? When you shrug it off, I feel that same thing. So I don't really know. It might be past some stuff.
Yeah, where does the anxiety come from? For a show, you've done a million shows and still walking onto stage again, the anxiety presents itself again, and you're what the?
That's what
why?
I'm saying.
I just played a million shows. Why is it here still?
Because you get used to it, is what I'm trying to say, and you had a good point with that. Because there's so much to do.
I think I've become numb to it.
That's what.
I'm probably self-medicating. You guys are not.
No, well, I feel I'm used to it too a little bit though.
Yeah.
I'm not
nothing surprises us. No. Exactly, nothing shocks us. Nothing surprises us.
No.
The depths that people will go to make money, to screw someone over, to feed their ego. That's why I'm it's spiritual. I'm a good person. I'm going to attract good people, and those are the people I'm going to hang and do business with.
1000%, and that's important.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing, and something that I've learned in my life is to be able to know when you need to walk away from a certain person. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I think that's your community is such a big deal, and sometimes it might hurt because you have passed with them or you feel you have a connection, but if you feel there isn't a positive reciprocation there in terms of friendship or I think sometimes you have to make that choice to walk away. But,
I think that's an element of self-care, right? And self-love. You have to have enough love and respect for
What?
yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, guys,
are we gonna stop? So should I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I wanted to ask Ryan about that decision to leave Maroon 5 and how difficult that must have been, and how did you decide, and how did you tell the band?
Well, ultimately, it was not my decision. We did present it in that way when we announced that I was leaving, that it was a mutual decision. I don't know if that was something I requested or they just thought it would be kind to put it that way, but ultimately I couldn't play the drums anymore. I literally could not coordinate playing the drums anymore. And, the way that Adam put it, this is at the start of my book, the opening scene, Adam said, even if we can get through the next record, even if you could play somehow well enough to put together an album that's as good as we want it to be, we're going to have a whole world tour booked. We're going to be out there on the road with dates all over the world. And we're going to have to pull the plug when this happens again, or if it happens again. And we all knew it's going to happen again, right? So it wasn't really a choice. It was kind of we have a responsibility to this thing we've built and to our fans to move forward in the best way we can. I knew that was the truth. I had to accept the reality of that. But it was devastating. It was absolutely heartbreaking. This was the thing that I built from my parents' garage to the biggest stages in the world over a decade. It was my entire identity. It was my best friends. Adam and Jesse and Mickey have been my best friends since I was 16 years old. I was now 28. And it was I didn't know who I was when I was, my entire self-definition was wrapped up in it. So yeah, I mean, it was a really tough time for me, and it was kind of one of those moments like, what is my life going to be after this? And I couldn't imagine anything was going to live up to what we had already done at that point. But somehow, a decade later, here I am doing things I couldn't have imagined I would be doing, and in some ways, more fulfilling.
Right.
I mean, I got to do some incredible things, write some great songs with the guys, record them, play on Saturday Night Live, play on the David Letterman show with Jay Leno, and all these amazing memories that I cherish. Mm-hmm. But now I'm helping people, now I'm doing things that are actually one-on-one or in groups affecting people's lives. Not that entertaining people isn't helping people as well. But
I was just going to say that.
I just, it's to me, it's like that was gratifying and fulfilling in one way. But in some ways, this feels even closer to like who I am and what I find really meaningful and purposeful in my life.
It makes me think about, I remember like sometimes when I would do a story and I'd go like on the road with a band or like, spend a lot of time with them, and fans would come up and say, my brother died and this song, got me through it. I always feel like the artist is carrying that emotion. Like it's a lot to lay on somebody that you don't really know. And of course it's like, well, you made a connection with my music, that's amazing, but the story around it is like, it's kind of hard to take, like if you hear it all the time, people are always coming up to you saying this terrible thing, my cancer, this car accident, suicide, whatever it is, it's like you're transferring all of that to the performer, and that's a lot.
Well, it's a weight in terms of feeling like your responsibility to them, and in the sense that you want to be able to, it's like a weird example, but like being a doctor and you're like, I want to be able to save everyone's life, but it's like kind of it's hard,
right?
Was that kind of what you mean in terms of?
I just mean like the weight of someone else's problems. You are now sort of carrying a little bit of that.
Well, and that's actually a really interesting thing to say too, because like I feel like I'm an empath in the sense of another, bringing it back to the thought, negative, positive thoughts. It's like if there's, when you go to like a mall or like you're on a subway, it's like all of these different emotions of people around you.
Energies.
I sponge it, and that's exactly what that feels like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's just like you take all those energies on and it sponges onto your body, and you're just like, oh my god, like it can't.
But imagine you're doing a meet and greet and you've got 200 people lined up, and let's say a quarter of them have some sort of story. Like, it's just, it's a lot, you know? And this is why artists actually need mental health, like professionals on the road and available to them, and labels don't help. Like they don't have health insurance for their artists. So it's like, this is how these problems sort of like fester and become bigger in individuals, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think labels should have in-house therapists, which is something that we've been talking about for a long time. It's like, I really think in these conversations, I hope that we can like be able to actually activate something like that, because to think about how amazing that would be for an artist that is afraid of therapy, for example, and they had somebody like you, or like, especially somebody like you that's that's been in Maroon 5, and it's like, imagine you were the therapist that Interscope, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden they were like, oh, like going through it. I mean, how cool would that be? And because sometimes it's as much as again, it's way better today and therapy is totally normalized, but at the same time, sometimes people are just, to what you were saying about, you go to a therapist and you're just like, I don't want to tell you anything, you know? So if it was somebody that you kind of felt like you could relate to in that sense, and you felt like there was, maybe it would be easier, especially if it was in your label and you felt sort of comfortable and supported that way. I think
especially like a band dynamic,
right?
It's like it's like a marriage of multiple people.
Sometimes it feels like you're the only one on the outside, and you're like, I can't say anything. So right now, I feel like the outsider. I'm sure.
I mean, Ryan, you're a marriage therapist. I mean, is that basically what bands need, like marriage therapy?
So you didn't mention that in this conversation. So you're specifically a marriage.
Well, that's the license, marriage and family therapist. It doesn't mean you have to work specifically with marriages, but yes, being in a band, I always related to it as being married to 3 or 4 other people, and you imagine how difficult it is to communicate with one person and really work out all those issues. you have all of the nuance that goes on between a group of people. And I think our band was actually relatively healthy in that regard, because we were well raised, like we were pretty respectful of each other. The arguments were, we kept things above the belt, so to speak. I mean, we didn't go really personal. We would argue about everything. I mean, about the music, about the performance and everything, but we were pretty respectful. So I felt pretty lucky about that. But even with that, I mean, the personalities can be so differing, and there can be different motivations for things. And, you know, inherently ego is going to get involved at a certain point, right? And we all have an ego. We all want to be represented in a certain way. And so when that comes into play and there's money involved and there's success involved, those are the things that break up bands, of course, right? Yeah. Or at the very least makes you miserable and you know, resentful and all the things that go along with it. So yeah, I certainly think, you know, having a couples or family therapist for a band or any kind of group that's a creative group together is something that's probably a necessity at a certain point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we should talk about.
I think Sony Publishing does
Sony
have
Publishing
mental
started.
health.
They just started, but I'm saying like,
during the pandemic. And there is this one which we'll have on a future episode. There's a new company called Backline.
I was just going to say Backline.
We're going to have them on and talking to them.
Hillary.
Yeah. So they are a 24/7 line for anybody on the road or their families or anybody related to the road to be able to call.
But with Sony Publishing, isn't it just like it's not like an actual therapist in the building? I thought it was like
no, it's like a call.
That's what I thought. But do I mean like an actual
like a staff therapist,
like a staff
like
therapist.
Billions, the Billions, the show. They have one in house. Like that would be amazing. Yeah.
I mean, what were you gonna
but
say?
here's the thing. I was going to say
executives too, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll bet their fair share of executives independently are at therapists, but
and the HR sometimes has to be that person.
The HR definitely has that. I was just thinking, it's like if they don't provide their artists health insurance, it's almost like a little bit of a slap in the face. Like, oh, but we'll hire a full-time counselor. It's like, how about give me health insurance? I'll go find my own counselor.
My friend Brooks Roach is now at Giant, and he advocated for that, and they're actually doing it. They have health insurance for all their artists.
That's really great.
Yeah, I think
that's kind of like the future of
the
the music business.
Yeah,
is like stop treating these artists like commodities, like what I was saying about like what you wear, like. Start treating artists like humans, and we'll all be better off. And we'll all be healthier people.
I just don't know where. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, when we say that, it's very. I mean, that's way more centered towards women, though. Like in terms of
that pressure,
like it's just of that pressure. I'm talking about in terms of.
But imagine being like an Adam Levine, like where you are the front man and you have those extra responsibilities because it's your face and you're the singer, like. That's a lot of pressure that's added on him that, it doesn't matter what gender you are fronting this thing. You're the head of the business. The show doesn't happen without you. It's
was there ever competition in the band in terms of was that an aspect of
Of course.
Yeah, and did any of you guys want to be the lead at any point, or was it?
Yeah, well, I think the original 4 members were all kind of musical alphas. We all had a vision of what we wanted the band to be, and if you asked each of us, it might be a little bit different, right? Mickey was kind of a theater guy. He liked being the center of attention. Jesse was just like this mad genius with his music and was a very prolific songwriter, and Adam was just kind of this savant who had natural talent. And then there was me, who was kind of obsessive compulsive and perfectionistic and just wanted to put my stamp on everything, and certainly had that control element, of things. So we all butted heads and had our own ideas and our own egos. Competition for sure. I mean, we were 16 years old when we started the band. I mean, you can imagine kids in their late teens and early 20s. Mm-hmm. We all wanted a lot of attention. We all wanted to be the ones who had our names written on the byline, and
well, that's what I'm saying. I can imagine.
But you actually made it. You actually manifested and made that happen. It wasn't just like some lofty dream. You guys actually worked towards that, and we can see from your videos that
it was very collaborative.
This is the steps. You start here, and you try this, and then you go this way, and then you have this venue, and it's a little bigger, and. Yeah, it's...
And how many kids in garage bands get to, that's amazing.
No, that's what I'm saying. You actually did manifest that, and it's very, very impressive.
Oh, I mean, it's incredible. But I always wonder in bands, not wonder, but I see, you see it, but, the aspect of, yes, Adam, of course, with those pressures, but then I could imagine for you guys, too, to be well, why, like, because a lot of times it becomes Adam or whatever, like whoever the lead is, and then it's like the other band members kind of become like, and I'm just saying I've never been in a band, but I'm saying yes, I've worked with bands and also all these things. So from the outside, I would think that would be stressful.
There was that moment. I think it was funny. I think just a couple years before we kind of had success finally, there was that No Doubt video. You remember for Don't Speak, where like they focus the camera on her and they're all kind of like watching her, like they're all funny. Like, and so there was like a running joke. It's like at some point that's going to happen with us. They're going to center out, pull Adam as the front man is going to be the star, and we're all going to be sitting there, the out of focus guys in the background.
It's that is it the Almost Famous scene where
Almost
they have
Famous.
the
I'm just one of the out of focus guys.
Yes. My favorite movie.
So I think we all knew that was coming, and it kind of had a bit of acceptance about it when it started to happen. But I remember, actually, you talk about women and men, and I know that female friends of mine that were in this suffered from this stuff a lot more than I did. But even as a male, when we started doing photo shoots and video shoots like on a weekly basis, and it was like you got to show up and look your best, be your best. And like the image at the time was boy bands and slacker rockers like the Strokes, right? Those were the two options you had, was to be a pretty boy who looked sort of prepubescent or a heroin chic, skinny, right? And I was like this guy, like a big athletic guy, played sports growing up, and the rest of the guys were pretty naturally skinny, and so I felt the pressure of like, I wouldn't eat all day if we had a photo shoot, A lot of times when I went on stage, I hadn't eaten, maybe a little, like a sandwich or something for lunch, and then waited until after the show at like midnight to have one full meal. And so I was definitely caught up in that to a certain extent. I don't think of myself as somebody who was, obsessed with image or anything like that. I really wasn't that type of person. But day after day, when you have to show up and there's like cameras pointing at you and you're looking at pictures and you're like, I look huge next to them, You're like, well, maybe I need to shrink myself down in some ways,
So you almost became more.
I think in some ways my eating was a little disordered when I was touring. It definitely contributed to probably the breakdown in some ways. Self-care in general. It's like eating, sleeping, these basic things that it's like you need enough sleep. You need enough nutrients to be your best self. Yeah. And when those things start to get stripped away or suffer in some ways, it's going to have an effect on you.
Yeah. Wow.
I happened to struggle with an eating disorder in high school, which was before I was really like pushed into the music business, which is a terrible thing to go through, going into music, because I think I didn't deal with it in therapy before I went into music. So I think being objectified coming into it was very much like I'm like a perfect candidate for those piranhas. You know what I mean? Because it was like I already felt those ways, so it's really dangerous in that sense. Because like when especially when you're, it's different because you said that you weren't prone to having those before, but if you are, and so many, 90% of girls have issues like this, right? That's just reality. And that's what's hard about it. Men, of course, I think men and women in this business struggle with these things, but I just mentioned, one, I am a woman, that's been my experience, but two, it's like, back in the day, especially 10 years ago, and then even before that, it's just the way that guys or male executives would treat women was just like literally like an object. You know what I mean? Like you're actually not a human being, and it's just so damaging. So, but we are getting somewhere, and that's good. And obviously you're a major help for that. And I think that, again, look at Angie, the fact that you found his column and were moved by it. That's it says something, and people need that, So I thank you, and I'm so grateful that I could meet you and do this today. So
thanks, Jenna, for having us.
Of course, well, I'm excited. Well, we'll do this again, a part 2. And I wanted to mention that I have a part, and I didn't do it today, but usually on all these episodes, Taylor endorses this, Taylor Guitars. And so usually the guests, and in this case, it should be both of you guys, but I get, you'll sign the Taylor guitar and we'll give it to a fan.
Cool.
So cool. I'll bring it, I'll find a way to coordinate that, but I was going to say that usually I like to take like a little quote. So maybe it can be the reactive,
radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance. Like I like to have like something. Let's like we can talk about it after, but I think like something from the conversation that we can kind of write on the guitar and have it as like help manifest the thoughts of whoever gets the guitar.
Yeah.
So
Love it.
Anyway.
Awesome.
Also call out Jed Foundation.
Oh, right.
Who you've been working with for a couple of years now, and
Yeah,
our
yeah.
amazing partner.
Love.
And yes,
She is the music, obviously.
She is the music.
And at the end of this and stuff, we'll list all the suicide lines
show
and
notes.
stuff like that. So, okay, well.
Yeah, and go get Ryan's book.
Yes. Oh,
Go
Go
get
get
Ryan's book.
Yes! Oh my God!
Yes.
Please. It's
Show us
You
the
wanna
book.
grab it?
Show us the book.
Yeah. There it is.
Harder to breathe.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Oh my
I
God!
recommend
So
it.
cool.
Yeah, huge.
It's amazing.
Congratulations.
And obviously
If
you
you want to
can
be a music journalist, we have freelance budget.
Oh my God! Let me see.
You know, honestly,
really?
that was like a dream come true to be a
Job
published
offer.
music journalist.
Your writing's really good.
Thank you.
Remember when I was like, this is
Oh my God! I saved.
I edited so many
sailed through
op-eds.
it. It was so easy to read.
This is so cool. Like I mean,
And follow Ryan on Instagram so you could see funny videos of Maroon 5
Every day.
in their
And if
yeah.
you're
What
a
is it?
mu-
What is
in
it?
their
Actually,
post-pubescent
let me do it now.
days.
Oh yeah, what's your
At Ryan Michael Dusick.
and Shirley Halperin
That's right.
at Shirley Halperin.
At Shirley Halperin.
Okay.
At
I follow
Jenna
you.
Andrews.
At
The
The
Jenna
Jenna
Andrews.
Andrews. Sorry, the Jenna Andrews.
And what is yours?
Mine is Angie Pag.
Oh,
Pag.
The first three initials,
Pag.
or the first, and
Yeah.
everybody messes it up. Everybody calls me Ang Ping. Everyone,
way.
yeah, because I'm like, there's not an extra N in there, but they just insert
Oh.
it, so it's
Here
it's
you are.
Angie Pag.
Okay, I think we're good. Well,
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
thanks you guys.
Thank you guys
Thanks,
so
you
much.
guys.
I just followed you.